Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Deanne Golden, and I am the president-elect for the Tulane Alumni Association Board of Directors. On behalf of the TAA, thank you all so much for joining us online this year for Women Making Waves. We are excited that the virtual platform has allowed us to bring these important discussions about women's leadership to alumni around the globe. This year's attendees are not only joining us from the United States, but they are also logging in from Australia, the Philippines, London, Malawi, Chile, and China. I hope you are taking advantage of the entire platform to not only hear from our speakers, but also to network with alumni and with shared interests as you and career paths. I am so honored to introduce our speakers today for this year's Herstories panel. We want to thank each of them for taking the time to share their expertise and experiences with us. Robyn Davies, who is also on the Tulane Alumni Association Board, will moderate today's discussion as we hear from a few of our fellow very distinguished alumni. Let me introduce Liz Bowie from ViaCyte. Next, Hazel Dean with the CDC. And third, Commander Katie Jacobson of the U.S. Navy. We know you will be inspired today as you hear our speakers share their personal stories of professional success, and we hope that you too will become more motivated to pursue your own leadership opportunities within your own organizations, your communities, and also the TAA. Ladies, thank you, and we're looking forward to today.
Thank you so much, Deanne, and welcome everyone. We are so happy to have you here today. Like Deanne said, I will be your host for today's panel. First up, just a little bit of context about me. I'm the founder of a sustainable fashion service that helps women dress like their best self and do some good too. And I also work as a brand and creative strategist for purpose-driven brands. I graduated from Tulane with a master's in Spanish and a minor in business. And admittedly, I had no idea what I wanted to do after I graduated. So I started talking to people, and I haven't stopped doing it since. Conversations like the one that we're going to have today have really fueled me as I try and navigate my career and my overall goal of trying to be my best self in my personal life and work. Before we get started, I wanted to walk y'all through the flow of the panel. So first, we're going to hear from each of the panelists. They're going to introduce themselves, give you some context about their work, and then one of my favorite questions, what do you want the world to know about you? And then after that, we're going to open it up to questions for the entire group. I'll ask a few questions that speak to various elements of their personal and professional leadership journey. And then I've got a question that's specific to each panelist. And after that, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. We've already gotten some great questions in the app. And then during the discussion, if you have another question that comes up, feel free to put it in the chat. As a little friendly reminder, while there are a million questions we want to ask this group of amazing women, let's keep it focused to their personal journey throughout leadership. So without further ado, Liz, would you please introduce yourself? What do you do, and what's that thing you want everyone to know about you?
Thank you, Robyn, for that sweet introduction and also the background about yourself. My name is Liz Bowie. I am Vice President and IP Counsel and Diversity and Inclusion Officer for ViaCyte. ViaCyte is a regenerative medicine clinical stage stem cell company developing 3 candidate products for an encapsulated cell therapy for the functional cure of type 1 diabetes. I know that's a mouthful. In short, it's a biotech company here in San Diego. And what I would like everyone to know about me, I think based on my background, that I really care about the human experience and how that relates to the world we live in and how we all experience it.
Thank you so much, Liz. Also, I appreciate you kind of breaking down what you do into terms for the rest of us folk. So next up, we have Hazel. Would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Robyn. Hello, everyone. I'm Hazel Dean. I'm Editor-in-Chief of Public Health Reports. Public Health Reports is the journal of the Office of the Surgeon General and the United States Public Health Service. It's one of the oldest journals of public health in the nation. I've been doing that now for almost 2 years. Prior to that, I was Deputy Director of the National Center for HIV/AIDS, Viral Hepatitis, STD, and TB Prevention at CDC. I like to refer to myself as the accidental public health worker. I don't think I ever set out to be in public health. I set out to be a medical researcher. And in my junior year in undergraduate school, I took a course in biostatistics. And from that came my love of biostatistics and the segue into working in public health, also trying to figure out how to work in international health, which was what I really intended to do when I graduated from college. I started CDC, I won't say how many, but lots of years ago. And I've managed to really hone in on what it is to be a public health worker. I like to call myself a health equity promoter, which has been a major part of my professional career and has really transitioned into my work with the journal as well. How do we do the best possible in the US for the populations that are disproportionately impacted by whatever disease we're looking at? And this has been really all of my public health career is working in health equity. I'm happy to be here today. I'm happy to talk about my experience with you, and also just a snippet of how we can all join in reducing health disparities and promoting health equity. Back to you, Robyn.
Thank you so much, Hazel, for that introduction. And there are several things that you touched on in your intro that I'm excited to get more into the overall group discussion, this idea of accidentally getting into something and how you honed in on your personal, your career path. Next up, Katie, would you please introduce yourself?
Of course. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Commander Katie Jacobson. I'm a 16-year veteran of the U.S. Navy. I've served on guided missile destroyers my entire career. And what basically that boils down to is I drive ships and I lead sailors. So it's been an incredibly rewarding career thus far. What I would like people to know about me is that I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunities and the people in my life who've got me where I am today. Everyone from my parents to my husband to my kids, they've all given me the support and the mentorship and the opportunities to thrive. And as far as being a sailor in the Navy, what I would offer is that the perspective that being in the Navy has given me has been phenomenal, in the sense that through the travel opportunities, the ability to lead incredible human beings through the challenges of our lifestyle, just the perspective of how incredibly grateful I am to be an American citizen. I've seen firsthand the human suffering and tragedies, and it just seeing it firsthand really offers me that perspective. And so again, I'm just incredibly grateful to be where I'm at in life. But I do acknowledge that I'm going to continue to evolve as a person, as a mother, as a spouse, as a leader. The very fact that I'm human means I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to fail. But I think failure is part of the equation to being ultimately successful in life. I'm reading a book right now that talks about how struggle leads ultimately to happiness. And when I first read that, I'm like, what is this author talking about? But it makes a lot of sense when you're challenged in regards to things that truly matter to you, like raising kids, right? It's hard work. But at the end of the day, when you see your children, it's like the ultimate success story. And same with my Navy career. Coming back from a long deployment, coming home to family, it's like, man, that was hard, but incredibly rewarding. So anyway, I consider myself a work in progress, but again, I'm incredibly grateful. All right, over to you, Robyn.
Gosh, Katie, thank you so much for that introduction. And I appreciate all three of you guys sharing kind of a bit more of the personal side to your work, because so often we see impressive people and just see the resumes and the accomplishments, and there's a lot more that goes into these impressive titles, of course, but the work in progress bit is something that I appreciate leader sharing. So to get started, we're going to talk about passion and finding it. So often we are told that, hey, like to have a meaningful career, just find your passion and go for it. And that sounds great, but it's actually a lot harder to put into practice. However, the three of you have all done that in your own unique way. So I would love for you guys to share, what sparked your interest in your line of work. Hazel, you mentioned your class, but I'd love for you to go even a little bit more into it. And then once you kind of found that, how did you find the courage to go for it? So if anyone wants to jump into this question, be my guest. Liz, how about you? Oh, pardon, Hazel.
Oh, you can go.
So Liz, do you want to go or you want me to go?
Go ahead, Hazel.
So I'll continue my story. In undergraduate school, there was a professor in math who really was trying to drum up people to be in her class. It was a new class on biostat. And of course, when I was at Spelman, I majored in biology. And I, like I said, was interested in being a medical researcher. And I took her class really on a whim and really enjoyed the class. And that was the first time I could see the marrying of biology with math. And I didn't particularly like math, but that's what I chose to begin with at Tulane. I had an MPH in international health with a concentration in biostat. And I know folks are wondering, well, how did you sort of switch over from biology to biostatistics? Well, I had to take courses at the graduate school in order to be able to graduate with a biostat degree. So that was difficult. But I think in the end, really it so much. That was the launch pad, if you will, for my career and finishing up Tulane with my Doctor of Science in biostatistics, which was very, very difficult, I will say. But, turns out that platform actually developed into who I am. And I call myself an epidemiologist because most of my professional career has been as an epidemiologist, which, as you know, biostatistics is sort of the foundation for the mathematical parts of epidemiology. So it was a very good transition and a very easy one at that. Back to you, Liz.
Well, thank you for the transition there, Hazel. I appreciate that. Well, that's an interesting question. I think having come from, I was a Vietnamese refugee who came over here after the Vietnam War with my siblings, but without my parents. And then we were adopted. Well, I actually was fostered and adopted by myself to a really nice white middle-class family in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I think really I chose the career because I just really had limited exposure. Like my friends and the people we knew, they were either teachers, engineers, lawyers, or doctors. So I grew up thinking that I had to be one of those four. Of course, now a few of those four, but still, it was like that was, that's what I thought I could do. I didn't, it wasn't until I came out to UCLA where I saw so many creatives that I was like, oh, this is what I could have done. But it was a little bit too late. But I think my real driver has always been that I never want to be poor again. I know it sounds really odd, but it's real. It's really a part of my DNA. And so I always knew that I would have my passion projects, but they would really not be what I made money doing. So I needed that financial security. So I needed something for sure that made me money. And so even actually graduating with my PhD and finally getting that postdoctoral job and looking into jobs, I was like, wow, professors don't make that much money. Like, how am I going to live in LA and how am I going to live in Southern California, with the California tax and do that? And so when I got an opportunity at a family wedding to be a science writer and to be a patent agent, I jumped all over it because I knew lawyers made money. And I knew that lawyers in big firms made money. And so I just always just said yes. So anyone who gave me a great opportunity, I always said yes. Even if I couldn't do it, I said yes, because I know I'm smart enough to figure it out. And I know that failure was not an option. Though I fail, it was just like, you just have to pick yourself back up, right? That's part of the resilience identification. And so, yeah, I just kept on saying yes. And then someone else asked me whether or not I wanted to go over and be formally trained to be a patent agent. So I said yes. And then, and then a partner asked me whether or not I wanted to go to law school and be a patent attorney. And I said yes. And then the firm said, would you like us to pay for part of this? And I said, absolutely yes. And so I just kept on saying yes until and by example, I just worked at it, But at the same time, I think in parallel, I always did sort of my philanthropy work. And that was really where I felt like I was complete. So I couldn't just be like a patent attorney and be in this corporate world and felt like that was all me. But on the other hand, I needed to do that for many years and still to provide, for myself and my family. And so that was important. And so I think it's different paths. And so, it's great for those who found their passion in their work. And I really do like my work. I love innovation. I love technology, but passionate about it, that's sort of like, that's more like, I think, my philanthropy and the human experience side of it. I'm passionate about people, understanding where they come from, what makes them tick. But I don't necessarily make money at this point doing that, although I do a lot of that work. So that's
I really appreciate you bringing up the money piece, because I feel like that often gets overlooked. Like we got to make some money to live. And so I think this idea of like what you were referencing, it's fantastic if you're able to, if your work is able to check off all these boxes, but it's also about looking beyond what are other ways, avenues that I can still be fulfilled, take care of myself and create the life that I want. And something that both you and Hazel said of kind of saying yes, like Hazel, you kind of saying yes to this class of this professor who was pitching you biostats, and you didn't really know what it was, but you said yes and you kind of kept going. And I definitely hear a lot of that with you too, Liz, of just, all right, kind of following the breadcrumbs. So thank you both. Katie, would love to hear your take on this question.
All right, so I'm going to go way back. I was probably 5 years old or so. My parents took me to a stocked pond where I was guaranteed to catch fish. I was enthralled. The fact that I could pull up this beautiful rainbow trout, and I just had a blast. It was like my favorite activity in the world. So that led to my love for wanting to always be on the water, because I always wanted to go fishing. When my family and we moved to Slidell, Louisiana, when I was about 8 years old, and I had access to Lake Pontchartrain. And that led to me getting involved in sailing, which led to me getting involved in the Sea Scouts program, which led to me finding my mentor, who was a Coast Guard commander, retired, but he was kind of involved in, obviously he knew the ins and outs of the military. And from him, from my mentor, I learned about the opportunity to pay for college, going the military route. And so it was because of him that I even remotely considered joining the military. So what I would offer is that, I never had a master blueprint for how I got to be, how I got started in my military career. But what started off as a love for being on the water kind of evolved. And I was open to trying new things. I was willing to take a risk on joining the military. I thought, I have no idea if this military lifestyle is for me, but I'm going to give it a shot. And worst case scenario, if I don't like it, I can get out after a few years and just chalk it up to life experience. So I would consider myself a master planner. And it might be counterintuitive, but I actually really like the uncertainty in life. I like the transition every few years. I like the change of pace. I think it's kind of exciting. And I'm nowhere near the end of my journey, so I'm looking forward to what life has to offer. Over to you.
Well, Katie, I love that you brought us back to you as a little girl. And I think there's a takeaway for all of us tuning in where for those of us who are trying to kind of figure out those things, like reflecting back on things that may have brought us joy when we were younger. And then, you referencing how this one person was really pivotal in helping you think about something you had never even considered before. And Liz, I think that kind of goes a bit back to what you were saying with how you chose your path. We think of what's in front of us oftentimes. And so whether it's taking a new class like you did, Hazel, that opened your eyes up to a whole new thing, it's this idea of kind of getting beyond our comfort zones and also checking in with what naturally excites us to kind of figure out that our next step. And like you said, viewing it as experience and not, it's a combination of like thinking ahead, but not getting too bogged down in the details so that we can, have action. So my next question came up after I had the pleasure of chatting with each of you individually before this panel. I immediately caught on that you guys are very positive, optimistic individuals. Now, that's not to say that you aren't realists, but there is just a thing about you when you're talking about your work, the things that personally excite you. It's like, okay, y'all really have a positive mindset, which is a very buzzy word we hear these days. But there's a reason it's buzzy, because it is very helpful in cultivating a successful personal and professional life. So with that being said, what are things that you do to keep this positive mindset? And how does it help you as a leader? Hazel, I wonder if you would start, because you mentioned something before we started the panel about how you kind of get in the zone.
Thanks, Robyn. For me, as a leader, I think it's important to write down things that are happening. So, usually we talk about journaling and what that means, but I keep a journal and I try not to make it where it's taxing on me, where I force myself to journal every day. I don't. My goal is to journal at least once a week. And it's writing down those things that have happened during the week that I think are important, whether or not they're negative or positive, and not really trying to understand them in the moment, but just making sure that you write them down. And what that does for me, I go back, whether it's a week later, a month later, and then I try to put the puzzle all together. And that helps me develop, whether it's personal lessons, leadership lessons. And so I'm trying not to stress myself out. And how I do that is this journal where it brings me back to who I am and what I want to be and what I am now. And I think a lot of time people talk about journaling, but then you have to have discipline to do it on a daily basis. Well, I've given myself a breather, if you will, a free card to say, you don't have to do it every day. Just as long as you do it at least once a week, it's okay. And then you go back and review to see what lessons you can glean from your journal entries. So you want me to go on? I'll stop there.
Hazel, I love that you shared how you've taken something that, again, we hear like journaling is great, but you've made it work for yourself in a way that, feels manageable. It's not just like something on top of, being an editor-in-chief of, I have to also do this. It's kind of breaking it down. And I also remember you said something about color, how color is a part of your positive mindset.
I love bright colors. So here, part of what I have on today is a bright fuchsia color. I think that helps me. I'm always a glass half full kind of person. So I put these little cues in my arsenal, if you will. Part of it is making sure that color is, whether it's around the home, in my office, it's there present. So when I look at it, I'm smiling. And that positive optimism stays with me throughout the day.
I love that. Liz, how about you?
Thank you, Robyn. That's interesting. So I think staying I'm hopeful. You know, something when I was adopted years ago, my grandmother said, Liz, hope is not a good strategy. And I've always remembered that. And, you know, and I'm like, okay, so I've got to get my side hustle, which is the money making side. And then I have to do something for my soul.
Yeah.
Because I love hope. You know what I mean? Hope keeps us alive. And I think of the work I do outside of work, my paid work. I always bring up the example of, you know, a homeless teen that I befriended when I worked at Father Joe's Villages. I sat on the board and of a Tucson Academy, which was a homeless shelter. And him and his sister came in, and they were both sort of, in a weird way, abandoned by their parents. And so I'm not that my parents abandoned me voluntarily. It was due to the war, but I empathized with him. And so I sort of just mentored him and kept up this relationship with him, you know, through the board and also through the work. And he's just this great kid, and he, like, you know, got himself an international baccalaureate, went to UCSD, and just graduated and defended his thesis at UC Irvine in transportation security. And he recently got married to a Vietnamese doctor. And I just feel like that's right. The actual work with him, I mean, I may have inspired him, but he gave me hope.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really important.
I love that you share. It's kind of, yes, like you were helping him, but how much you got back in return as well, and how that kind of fuels your soul to do the work that you do.
And I think that's really important. So, you know, at my stage now, I can also obviously donate, you know, to various causes. But I think donations is so removed. I think you actually have to do that one-to-one contact work. That's where, for me, hope comes from. It's not writing a check and going, I hope it goes to the right, you know, I hope it's used well. I hope it goes to the right fund, you know, used properly, or go to the right individuals, or, you know, or goes to those who need help. I like being on the ground floor and actually, you know, solving the problems and working with people, because that inspires me. And that, you know, it's when I interact with people is when I feel the most hopeful, and that it's all going to be okay. You know,
Yeah.
You know, we live through tragedies, crisis is opportunity, but if we work with people and communicate and connect, you know, really connect with humans, yeah, that's a glass is half full right there.
100%. And you know, you really did the kind of reflected in, again, on what makes you whole and motivates you. And like you said, it's like there are many ways to give back, and that can make you feel good, but you found that unique way of connecting one-on-one was really fulfilling to you. So I think that's kind of a thought for all of us, of just like kind of, again, checking in with what makes us feel whole with our contribution. Katie, you're up next.
All right, great. So Liz, man, you are speaking my language. So I'm going to double down on your comments. So, you know, growing up in the 80s, I used to watch Mr. Rogers a lot, and I actually have a book of quotes by Mr. Rogers. And so there's one quote that really sticks with me, and it's he says, quote, "The thing I remember best about successful people I've met all through the years is their obvious delight in what they're doing. And it seems to have very little to do with their worldly success. They just love what they're doing, and they love it in front of others." So I just think that's super, super powerful. And so, you know, to your original question, what do? I do what I love. And that kind of goes back to my previous comments. So what does that look like for me? It's kind of mirrors what the other panelists have already spoken about. For me, I love to problem solve. I love to be productive. I love to interact with people. I find people fascinating. I love to learn what makes them tick. I love to mentor sailors. I enjoy being active, working out, running, you know, anything outdoors. Spending quality time with my family, you know, outings, date nights with my husband. I love going to bed early. I have no shame in going to bed at 9 p.m. on a Friday night. But I also like to get up early and prepare and get my thoughts together. I enjoy, you know, the hour or two of quiet time if my 4-year-old lets me sleep in. You know, I enjoy adult beverages with my friends, you know, so now, to the second part of your question about how it helps me as a leader, I think when you do what you love in front of others and it's truly authentic, it buys you more credibility as a person, which in turn gives you more influence as a leader. When you're approachable, when you're vulnerable, when you're humble, others are willing to, and you're willing to listen to other people's ideas. That in turn gives you trust. And to me, without trust, I don't see how you can be an effective leader without that element. So back over to you.
Well, first, Katie, thank you for sharing that Mr. Rogers quote. Fantastic. And I love it that it's you keep the book on your desk. There's so many things that we learn when we're younger that if we could just like stick true through adulthood, we'd probably be a lot better off. What you just shared about leadership is kind of a perfect segue into my next question, which is about authentic leadership. Chatting with each of you, there's no doubt that you are powerhouse leaders in your respective fields, but you do so in a way that is a little different from like what society made me think a leader had to be when I was younger. And I know Hazel, we were chatting about kind of authentic leadership and kind of owning your style and how it allows people to trust you, just like you were saying, Katie. It's so important. And so I'd love for you guys to, if you could share a little bit more about how did you learn how to lead authentically? And then what advice do you have for those who are starting off on our leadership journey? Hazel, I'll have you start it off again, please.
Thanks, Robyn. I think for me, all through my career, I've really tried to be true to who I am in all the jobs that I've had, most of which was not me looking for the job, but actually people looking at me and suggesting that this would be a good job. I like to say there's never a job that I didn't like and enjoy. And I think really looking for your joy as an individual, and then how do you then take that through to your career? Sometimes it's not, all the shiny things, but really honing in on what you like. For me in my career, I've honed in on my like for health equity, what that means. And to be honest, I didn't know that that was sort of my world until someone brought that to my attention based on the work that I had done. They pointed out everything that I had done in HIV surveillance and how it pointed back to my love of looking at populations and then trying to figure out solutions based on surveillance data on how we can help populations do better in whatever they needed to do better in. And that has carried me all through the executive positions that I've had, whether it's Associate Director for Health Equity or in my last position as Deputy Director. And in that, also looking at how you treat people. People will always remember, no matter what, how you treat them. So if I try to do to people as I want them to do to me, meaning treat them as well as you want them to treat you. And I think as a leader, we have to remember that. It's not always, being the tough leader, but some of those soft skills I think matters. And in a pinch, it's the soft skills that's going to help you as a leader and help you lead those who you're trying to lead and help them follow you. And I think for me, that's been sort of like the thread that's permeated throughout my entire career, treating people well, and then finding, your inner joy. What does that mean for you as far as a career choice? And then making sure that you stick to that, because sometimes we can be derailed, but making sure you come back and center yourself to say, well, this is what I enjoy. And maybe the next job is not a part of what I'll enjoy. So I'm just going to stay still for now before I move on.
Gosh, you touched on so many great things there. And something I liked kind of early on, you were talking about how you never viewed yourself as a health advocate, but it was someone else who was like, Hazel, you've been doing all these things, and just kind of helping you see your work in a new light. I think that's kind of really important, as even as you are an accomplished leader, like having someone else kind of show you like, oh, like this is something else that you may not have considered with your work. And I your way of leading the way you'd like to be others to treat you is such, it sounds just a basic concept, but often we forget it. And if more of us could do that, again, the world would be a little better place. So thank you. Liz, would you share with us, please?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So as far as leading authentically, I think early on in your career, you just have to do the work. And you have to do the work well. And you have to demonstrate that you can solve really difficult problems. But I've always had sort of a healthy suspicion of power. And so for me, I didn't want to step into leadership too early because I didn't want to be seen as abusing that sort of right or authority, you know, and that trust, if you will. And so I spent a lot of years just doing the work, you know, getting to know my colleagues at work, advocating for them silently and, you know, and from behind the scenes where I could, making them look better. And doing that, you know, not just outside of work, but, you know, within the work. And then slowly, you know, choosing the opportunities in which I felt I could step up and if I can make the difference. So not just volunteering and being a leader for the sake of leadership and development, but really doing it such that it struck a chord with me. You know, it's a position I felt strongly about, it's a person I felt strongly about, and it's a cause I feel strongly about. And so, and that's how I came to be with regards to being the diversity and inclusion officer. Because I think, you know, the last decade, you know, since the Black Lives Matter movement, and then of course, you know, this past year has just been in many ways toxic, you know, to us and to the community. And I've done so much inclusion work before it was called diversity and inclusion. You know, a lot of what I did was really more about economic inclusion because I had personal experience with that. And economic inclusion brings you to people and works that has you working with people who are, you know, underserved, under-resourced, and whatever color and creed they may be. That was independent, but that was really the commonality. And so all that was, you know, all that came to surface this past year, right, in 2020, and that whole wealth gap, racial, it was just, the whole disparity was just completely overwhelming. And having done so much work in that outside of what I'm paid for, I just felt like I had to step up to help lead, you know, the company in a biotech company, probably for the first time, to really think about their issues and to think about what that privilege looks like and what access and opportunity looks like. And for those who don't have it, you know, is it like, I mean, we have a huge San Diego biotech community up here and what we call Biotech Beach, but there are other parts of San Diego that probably, you know, have never even seen anyone like us. So it's my job and my responsibility to get in front of them. You know, because you can't be it if you can't see it, right? I mean, that's really true for a lot of under-resourced and communities. And so it's going out there, it's creating these opportunities and giving them access, because that is a privilege that, you know, at this stage of my life, I sometimes take for granted, and I know many people take for granted. And that's, I think, the authenticity. It's, you know, finding that moment in time where it's your time to step up.
What a perfect summary of what you just shared, the doing the work. And so it's not necessarily just like doing it so I can be, you know, the CEO of this or whatnot. It's, you know, doing it because you care. And like you said, finding those unique moments that speak to your collective experience where you can help others. Thank you so much. Katie, would you finish us off?
Of course. So just based on personal experience, you know, I know how I respond to inauthentic leaders, and it's not favorably. I feel like I can sniff people out. People are intuitive, right? They're going to know if you're being genuine or if you're faking it. So I concur with Hazel, what she said. You have to be genuine to yourself. You know, be the leader that you naturally are. Now, of course, you can make some, you know, fine tune. But it can't go against your natural grain. And definitely, you know, don't be the leader that someone else tells you that you need to be. So, you know, for me, I probably don't fit the stereotypical profile, you know, military profile. I'm not one to raise my voice. On occasion, I will do so when, you know, when it's necessary, but I don't find that to be screaming at people. That's not my thing. That's not how I lead. So I'm not going to do that. I'm very receptive to feedback. I'm always pulsing my subordinates and of course my bosses for their feedback. But I believe in the team concept to come to a collective solution when time is available. Sometimes I have to make snap decisions, and I'll do that, no problem. But I would prefer to kind of get feedback. I would also, I consider myself pretty compassionate. I have a lot of sailors that will get in trouble. And usually my first thought is not, gosh, I can't believe so-and-so did this. They must have some kind of malicious intention. I will always, kind of think maybe the process failed them. So let's pull the string. Let's find out why the sailor did that, and so sometimes, I'm right. And other times, I'm disappointed. But, I tend to lean towards the compassionate route until I'm proven wrong. So again, it just goes back to, be true to who you are and don't fake it. Over.
I was on mute. The compassionate piece is something that is, it's innately a part of you. And when we were talking before, you mentioned how like you're becoming a mother also really infused the work that you do. And so I was wondering if you could, you were sharing with me that, you aren't an anomaly being a mother and working in the Navy. You have several other colleagues who do it. And also, I love this, you're having fun too. And so I was wondering if you could share with us, what steps you took to set yourself up for success as a working mother.
Okay, well, I would say that a glass of wine always helps. Just kidding. Well, not really. But no, in all seriousness, I think that it's really important to take care of myself or yourself first. So, think of airplanes, right? Before you take off, they always talk about how if the mask drops, put the mask on yourself before you put it on your child. And that makes sense for a lot of reasons. So the same logic applies. I've got to be whole myself before I can provide and be a leader to my family or to my sailors. And that goes back to the previous conversation about prioritizing the things that are important to you, what ground you, what centers you, what makes you tick and satisfies you, personally and professionally. Focus on the things you love. It requires also finding a balance. Work, kids, spouse, friends, they all kind of need, some individual attention. And sometimes that requires us to load shed the things that are not important to us in life. So often we get wrapped around, social media, and we get involved in projects that aren't very value adding in our lives. So I think it's important to kind of take a round turn and really think about, is this value adding to my life? And if the answer is no, then load shed it, get rid of that stuff. I would also encourage people, like I do, I ask for help. When I get overwhelmed or I need some time with my husband, my mother-in-law is nearby, and she's happy to take the kids, spend quality time with her grandkids, so that my husband and I can go on a date night. Before COVID, we were really good about doing date nights once every couple weeks. But just making time for you, for your spouse, for your kids, quality, not quantity. If time, to me, time is my most precious commodity. It's something I can't get more of, no matter how much I work or how much money I have, right? So, maid service, lawn service, get groceries delivered, right? That's all stuff that can buy me time. And then I think communicating expectations, and managing expectations. What's the plan? Here's what you can expect, not only with my family, but with my boss as well. If I have a family commitment, I'm going to say, sir, ma'am, I've got this going on and I need to leave at this time. So I think that's important. And as you alluded to, I think it's very important to laugh and have fun with it and just enjoy the little things in life. Back to you, Robyn.
Gosh, Katie, you touched on so many good things there. We're getting some really great questions in the chat too. And I'm going to take one of those because it kind of tees up perfectly to a question I wanted to ask you specifically, Hazel. While you were chatting, you said with a laugh, I've got a lot of people in my life who are brutally honest with me, but it's good. These are my mentors and my friends because they help me see my blind spots. And that requires like pretty thick skin to hear that. So my kind of a multi-pronged question here, as far as, cultivating those relationships, how did you do it? And then, how do you prevent the honesty from getting you down and using a fuel to do your better work?
Yeah, thank you, Robyn. For the mentors in my life, the professional mentors, I really looked at where I was in my career and where I wanted to be. I was a scientist wanting to get into an executive level position. So I set about looking around CDC and through government for those types of people first. I didn't care who you were. I had probably I approached maybe 10 people, and out of the 10, only 2 said yes. People said they didn't have time or whatever. But the 2 that did say yes, they were very different. And what I asked of them is that, number one, can you be honest? I think we have to sort of embrace what we want in a mentor. And mentors to me are sort of like a second glove. You're supposed to have them close to you. They're supposed to know the ins and outs about you, even sometimes your personal life, because your personal life will affect your work life. So I asked if they could be honest. I wanted someone to be honest. Both said yes. And one was a little bit more honest than the other. But I think we have to define on paper and in our minds what we want as in a mentor. And I did. I needed somebody to tell me, Hazel, you're doing X, Y, Z wrong. Here's how you should approach this. But sometimes mentees are not honest with themselves when they go looking for a mentor. I think as a mentee, you have to really decide, what do you want? And if you want someone to gloss over what you're doing, this is not a mentor. A mentor to me is an honest person who will try to help you get to the next level, almost at all costs. And that would require that you're open to the suggestions, you're open to the criticism, and you're able to take that information and filter it back in a positive way that then will advance your career. And that's what I opened myself up to. And fortunately for me, I found 2 people who could be brutally honest and who in the end helped me propel myself to the next level by incorporating, not just telling me what's wrong, but providing suggestions on how I can improve what I was doing, or how you could take courses that will then help you move to the next level. These are the kinds of mentors I was looking for, not a checkoff box, if you will. And I would encourage folks, when you're looking for mentors, really decide for yourself on paper, write it down. You could check off 5 things, and maybe out of the 5, you really only want 3. But write it down so it'll be a reminder to you that these are the things that I'm looking for, and constantly looking for those things in order to take you to the next level.
There's a kind of a theme of you writing things down as to keep you centered, which I really love. You mentioned, of course, like earlier on in the conversation about with your journaling, but also you mentioned like, when you start to kind of veer off path, having something down will really remind you of, hey, why am I engaging with this person? And like you said, it all kind of goes back to, you took the time to figure out what you uniquely needed from a mentor. So you were able to, ask that of someone. I think it's so useful. We have to kind of think about what we need before we can ask of others. Liz, so you had you chatted a little bit in the conversation about your background of coming to the U.S. as a Vietnamese war refugee, and before we were chatting, you shared your experience as an IELTS setter has really fueled your academic experience, but also your work professionally. And I was wondering if you could talk about how you've harnessed this into a power that fuels you into the work that you do.
Thanks, Robyn, for the question. I think, coming to Tulane, and I know because there's so many Tulane alums watching, but I was really like out of my place. And so I applied to a lot of schools, got accepted by Tulane, got a fat scholarship. I had never even seen Tulane, never been on campus. All I saw, and this was like, the days, the internet was just getting started. And I just saw the brochure, everybody gets the brochure. Katie, I also got a brochure from the Navy, and I applied because they gave me Navy socks, and I was like, that's cool, I got something free. But so I go to Tulane, so I've never even been there. And I knew I just had a lot of relatives in New Orleans. And this is just goes to show you my frame of mind. I sent all my stuff down on the train because that was the cheapest way to get there. Right, not UPS, not FedEx, or whatever other means. And I get there, and my uncle moves me in, and I think he has like, a 1970 Nova with 2 primers on it. And so I pull in, and I don't know if, Josephine Louise has that circular driveway, right? And it's move day. And I am like, whoa, I'm so out of my league here. And so, pulling right behind me is my roommate, who I have exchanged letters with, and she's driving a big fat red Beamer. And can I tell you, I didn't even know the word Beamer. I was just like, again, it was just sort of like, a total disconnect. And we get up to my room, and, she moved in before me, and she was like, oh yeah, I love Laura Ashley. So I'm really, I hope you like Laura Ashley too. I am looking around for Laura Ashley. I am like, whoa, where is this girl? She's hiding really well. I'm just like, I'm looking around like, what the heck? Where's the Laura Ashley? And then until like someone came and sat down on her bed and her comforter and said, oh, I love your Laura Ashley comforter. And I was just like every single day that year, my first year, I was just like, oh my God, when is this going to stop? And then she invited me before her parents left to go to Commander's Palace. And I'm like, what? I mean, I don't even, Commander's Palace? Definitely I didn't belong there. So I made up some excuse, but really it was just, I couldn't fathom and picture myself, after I discovered who Laura Ashley was, and then all of a sudden to be eating at Commander's Palace. And so when I started actually, and I had a boyfriend there at the time, volunteering with, Hunger Action Team of Tulane, Kids with the Responsibility of Everyone, with Cactus, the volunteer group at Tulane campus, I was so much more at ease. So much more. I was like, this I get, you know what I mean? Like, this I understand. And so that's why I keep on doing the work, because I still understand that kid.
Finding your people too. It sounds, in every scenario, just finding those people you can connect with. Thank you for sharing that. We've been getting a ton of great questions. However, we've got 6 minutes left, so I'm going to try and I'll pick one, and maybe if we can all try and share some little tidbits in here. One of the questions from the app, we've got someone who is kind of feeling that they are at the end of their current career arc because of changes in market. I think a lot of us can relate to that with what's happening with COVID. And she's kind of lacking some drive to kind of figure out what to do next. What have you guys done in moments when you're feeling kind of low about what do I do? What do I do next? How do I get momentum going?
So for me, I think it's really digging within, what are some of the things that you like to do? What are your passions? And then how do you transfer those skills to something else? And I experienced this in a good way moving into the editorship position, because I never thought in a million years that I would be an editor of a journal. And that was definitely not on my career path. So, really looking at you as a person, what are the things that you like to do and how do you transfer those skills over? For me, it was the whole passion about leadership development, health equity. So then I've sort of infused some of those things into my leadership for the journal. But but how do you then transfer those skills to something new to sort of reinvent yourself, but still digging in deep for the passion that you have?
Thank you, Hazel. Anyone else want to chime in?
So maybe I didn't understand the question, but I'll take a stab at it anyway. So, I think it's important to give yourself some breathing room and not to pressurize yourself, to force you into a decision for the sake of making a decision because you feel like you have to make it. So, take some time for yourself, like get away from the noise, figure out what it is you want to do. And if you don't know, that's okay. Take some time, figure it out, go take a vacation. I know that I think best and I think most clearly for me when I'm by myself in the early morning hours, everything is very clear to me. But when I'm surrounded by noise and kids and I'm on the ship and it's busy, my brain is just too active to kind of sort through, okay, what am I doing again? So I would just offer, don't pressurize yourself if you don't have, unless it's absolutely required. Take the time to give yourself some breathing room and to think. Over.
So I think for me, it's a lot of side hustles, I call them. And I'm always doing things, that are just like, if I'm interested in it, I'm just going to pursue it, in some small minor way. If I'm going to meet someone, that has done that, I just explore their career opportunities and, and see how they got into that space. So I definitely get career envy. I think we all do. Like, oh, you could do that. I had no idea you could do that. Oh, you get paid for that? I had no idea you got paid for that. And, and so part of, all the work I do outside serving on nonprofit boards is just to put myself out there, for other opportunities, should I choose to sort of do a career pivot, working with students, working at the law school. So I teach as an adjunct faculty at 2 Catholic law schools, USD Law School and Dayton Law School. And I love working with students and, maybe one day I'll go back into academia and that gives me a little foot in the door with regards to that. And I just love working with students, I think, and young people, because again, that's hope. Getting them, I feel like before it's too late, encouraging them to sort of, because I know what that felt like, so I think high school and early and college is like the greatest time because you're self-aware enough to really screw things up. And you're self-aware enough to sort of really doubt who you are. And I think having been an outsider, and in many ways still, I really connect with that. I get that. And so if I can, help others, just in some way sharing my story or, other sort of anecdotes, I think, that's a good thing. And that's helped me with regards to just, putting me in different places outside of work.
Liz, it's looking at beyond yourself, and I think that's a really beautiful way to end this conversation. I am so grateful for y'all sharing your stories. So my big takeaways that I've really, pardon, that was my dishwasher, that beeping, is you guys have all taken the time to really kind of think about what you uniquely wanted from the world, which sounds like a big idea, but breaking it down into small pieces, and saying yes, and thinking about how you could help others, finding your people, asking for help. And also, y'all are an incredibly humble bunch of people. And I think that there's a lot to be said there. So thank you again for joining. Thank you for all the participants. I apologize that we didn't get to all of your questions, but I'm sure you took away some really great nuggets from this. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Robyn.
Thanks, Robyn.